Hello. So, I love I love this book so much. On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. Um, it I have been reading quotes from it because I my Pinterest board comes up with quotes from texts, just based on my algorithm, and I have wanted to read this for such a long time that I am just so happy to have the opportunity to read it for this class and to lead a discussion on it. So I'm excited to share it with all of you. Um, One of the first things I noticed about the text was the form of address in it, the way that it's written with this voice going directly to the loved one at the center of the novel. Um, well, from the figure at the center of the novel to the mother. Um, and the way that that shaped the text is really quite lovely, to have it shaped as a letter to allow us to connect with, I'm going to say Little Dog versus Ocean, since it is a fictionalized kind of autobiography, biographical text or fictionalized memoir. Um, but yeah, so as far as like Little Dog's connection with his parent and how that plays out through the text was so interesting to read, and I enjoyed it so much. But I'm going to jump right into the prompts that I have for us. So the first one, within the text of On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, Ocean Vuong dates, I am writing because they told me to never start a sentence with because. But I wasn't trying to make a sentence, I was trying to break free. Because freedom, I am told, is nothing but the distance between the hunter and its prey. What does the author argue regarding the nature of freedom through his use of language? How can we see him using his methods of articulation in the text to break free from constraint? Something we can think about is how he uses elements of poetry in the breaking of the rules, which is a tradition of its own. He's using tools from that to create this. So there's an element of different rules being followed. So we have kind of an element of depth in how we approach this question. How do we look at it? How do we understand his pushback against power, his pushback against expected linguistics, specifically English linguistics? How does that help us understand his character as someone who speaks a different language and who serves as a communicator for his mother too, that in a way that allows her to interact with the world? How do we take our understanding of those aspects of his identity and apply it to how he's writing this text? As you'll see in this question, I give the option, you don't have to, but you can integrate research from the article, from Sophia de Rousseau's article, Subjecting Sentences, Syntax, and Power in Ocean Vuong's On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous. If you would like to kind of deepen your understanding of that element of the text through her writing. Additionally, we have consider the way Little Dog's mother alternates between tenderness and violence within the text of On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous. How is this element replicated throughout the rest of the text? How can we see the contrast of violence and tenderness impacting his relationships with his mother, his family members, his romantic interests? If you choose, you may integrate elements of the artwork in Francis Cannon's article, Tenderness and Violence Go Hand in Hand. How does this artwork aid in the development of meaning or our comprehension of this aspect of the text? So when we look at this source, we're going to see that there's some really captivating pieces of art that are present, and we can analyze the way the author has portrayed this art. For example, when she portrays the little boy holding the gun, it's pointing in the direction of the little boy wearing the wedding dress, both of which are Little Dog. What is this positioning? If we analyze it, how does it reflect on the text? So we have some opportunities to deepen our analysis there. And then the last question I have is, consider Paul's role in the text. How does his role shift from functioning as little dog's grandpa to being Paul, and then the moment where he offers that ownership of the role of grandfather, when the neighbor appears in the text and is not directing her speech to little dog. How does that shift or change little dog's perception of his own identity, his perception of self, his perception of belonging as part of a familial group? Then we have the annotated bibliography. So we have Tenderness and Violence Go Hand in Hand, a graphic review of Ocean Vuong's On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Francis Cannon. This source uses visual art, as I mentioned earlier, to contrast the nature of interwoven violence and tenderness integrated into little dog's experiences in relation to his mother. The author creates an argument regarding how little dog must live in costume and through multiple identities, as represented with images of him portrayed with a dog's head, wearing a wedding dress, being a strong American boy through the consumption of milk, with no visual alteration of his form. He's just standing as a little boy, but there is the text around it that shapes the expectation that is hovering over this little boy. Cannon also examines other symbols from the text and what they represent in relation to safety and an inability to trust appearance. In Jennifer Cho's We Were Born from Beauty, Disinheriting Genealogies of Refuge and Queer Shame in Ocean Vuong's On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, Cho argues that Vuong's novel explores the way in which shame and experience being a refugee are inherently intertwined. So here, how do we pull those pieces of identity apart, or even should we? As we read through this text, we have the opportunity to read a critique about the impact of trauma and how it spreads throughout a family, and how the aspect of shame is examined in the text, both through the concept of being a refugee and also through the shame surrounding queerness and internalized homophobia. In Subjecting Sentences, Syntax and Power in Ocean Vuong's On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, I've touched on this since it is one of the articles we can consult to develop our prompts further. This one really delves into how Vuong is using language and how he's using it to destabilize aspects of power in our society. When we are thinking about this, what does it mean also that he's written in this text in English, to use English to destabilize the power that we've constructed through language within the society of America? But to go back to the article, it really takes a deep look at how Vuong is using a deviation from linguistic expectation to go deeper into the analysis of the text on the line and through its construction as a whole. We can also consider how this article addresses communication as a source of power between little dog and his mother. One thing we can think about is that it is through language that he addresses his mother and says for her to stop hurting him. So that is using language to shift a power dynamic and to redress it. And then we've got On Being Topped. So this one is a very straight to the point article on how aspects of the body are used within the text to examine healing from internalized homophobia through the vulnerability of intimacy, physical intimacy, specifically anal penetration, the act of being topped, the way in which Vuong describes healing through pleasure and understanding of the self. So that one, honestly, I found that to be my favorite article. I thought it was very, very well, a very thorough examination of queerness in the text and an examination of the body and penetration and how that functions to build connection and healing through vulnerability, and how how little dog's interactions with Trevor shape his identity as a queer person going forward after he has that first queer connection within the text. And To Live is a Matter of Time, Memory, Survival, and Queer Refugeehood, Sarah Solier e Arjoni tackles an argument about how being a refugee is not like something that just ends. It is not, there's a period of time after coming to America in which you are a refugee and then you become assimilated. Instead, she argues that there are elements of continuity there where she is examining how someone who's had the experiences of being a refugee, they stay in that state over time, and are impacted by it throughout their life. And she uses the way Vuong writes in and out of time, where it's not linear, to really analyze how he does this in a way that shows the impact of being a refugee as something that doesn't end. Not even in his role as a child who has come to America, he is carrying the weight of this generational memory surrounding aspects of trauma that come from refugeehood, and then she interconnects it with queerness, so that we have this examination not only of little dog's function as a refugee, but also how it intersects with queerness and how they are interconnected, and how queer temporality functions in a way that shapes our understanding of the text through a blending of these two ideas, concepts, impacts on identity. Yeah. So this is what I have for us. I am so excited for our discussions. I'm so excited to chat with you about this material. I guess let's just get ready to do some work on this. Have a wonderful day, and I hope you enjoyed this book as much as I did. Thank you.